JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is unlike any series out there. If it didn't have its bizarre elements, it simply wouldn't be the same. It's this bizarreness which breathes life into the series, adding a charm to its storylines, characters, and villains. It's tough to put a finger on one exact thing which makes this series so bizarre. From its use of ridiculous body horror to its twisted sense of humour, each part features a different setting and cast with a similarly diverse array of bizarre things happening in it. Out of all of these parts, it was after reading part 6 that I caught on to something which Hirohiko Araki, the author of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, has been doing since the very beginning of the manga. This bizarre element is something which almost underlines the entire story and sublimely connects each of the parts to one another. The idea in question is the manipulation of time. Starting all the way back in 1880, we follow the story of the Joestar family and its rivals, the Brandos. Whilst time manipulation isn't a feature of the series just yet, and won't be until part 3, we do get to see two different places in time being portrayed. England in the late 19th century for part 1, and America in the early 20th century for part 2. Both parts respectively star two different members of the same family, leaping from one generation to the next. Both of the first two parts are bizarre for their own unique quirks. From witty jokes and sudden vampiric possession, to ancient Aztec Ubermenschies and world domination. The first two parts contain a clear lack of lineation to the rest of the series, and so naturally, they don't support my argument of time manipulation too well at all. They still act as a good starting point to my reasoning, however, in that the main antagonist from all that time ago in 1880 makes a return in part 3. For the third part of the story, time catches up all the way to the 1980s, which was actually when this part was being released, so for all intents and purposes this is the present day. Instead of taking place in a time from the past, we get the introduction to the first point of my argument, an introduction to stands, or more importantly, an introduction to the world. The world is a stand that can manipulate time, if only for a couple of seconds at most, and allow its user to move around and act whilst everything is frozen around them. In a series that focuses on the up and close detailed fights, this power basically trumps everything that it is pitted against. Its terrifying capabilities are fully realised in Kakyoin's death scene. We have our Stardust Crusaders finally make it to Egypt, and begin their fated encounter against Dio, and no longer than a couple of seconds later, one of them is pulverised and killed instantly. The final fight between the Stardust Crusaders and Dio is easily the strongest portion of the third part, and it's clear to see why. The world is something that is stacked so far against anything that the main characters have in their arsenal that it genuinely conveys a feeling of hopelessness, as the protagonists scrabble around whilst trying not to die. This hopelessness heightens with the death of Kakyoin, the perceived death of Joseph, Jotaro almost killing himself, and the distraction that Polnareff manages to throw at Dio. When it culminates in the discovery that Jotaro can use the world as well, it feels like a shot in the dark, considering that Dio has had so much time with the stand, and knows how to use it so much better with deadly efficiency. It's fitting that the generational element from the beginning of the story ends with both members of these families manipulating time against one another, as their stories are one which goes through so much time. It feels earned when Jotaro succeeds against Dio and watches as the sun vanquishes him, as it not only brings the story of Dio to a full circle by starting and ending his villainy in sunlight on a bridge, but by finishing the rivalry of the families altogether. Hirohiko Araki published the first 6 parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in Weekly Shonen Jump, the biggest manga magazine in Japan that is famous for its gargantuan series that can meet critical acclaim or be cancelled long before their time. In order to last in Weekly Shonen Jump, series need to be innovative and compelling to draw an audience that constantly sells to its publishers. This grand generational storytelling in a Shonen Jump manga was something that was really original at the time of release and made JoJo stand out from the crowd. Obviously, artists need to keep things on a constant upwards incline, and so Araki begins ascending things with the popular method in battle mangas of power scaling. The first bad guy needs to be weaker than the next or the last in order to build a sense of adversity for the protagonist. Even though JoJo has a new story every couple of years, this doesn't mean that Araki can reset everything at the beginning of each part and end with Dio again and again and again. Araki needed to keep things fresh, and so he continued to build the final antagonist whilst also developing the theme of time manipulation. Part 4, for example, showcases a more episodic format. The overall tone and mood of the part is more light-hearted, and this is purposeful for when the main antagonist finally takes center stage. Yoshikage Kira is a merciless serial killer who possesses a deadly stand that only gets stronger with time. The final arc of Part 4 is this bloodbath Groundhog's Day that repeats and repeats until things come to a deadly close. Kira is given a lot of power thanks to Enyeba's bow and arrow, and Araki's being very clever with this. Although Dio is dead and the generational fight is over, Dio's presence is very much still alive. If it wasn't for Dio, the bow and arrow would never have been used by Enyeba and so many people wouldn't have had stands. And so the very appearance of this object in Part 4's final fight is a massive red herring for where Araki is taking things. The world can stop time, Killer Queen can go back in time, and King Crimson can erase it altogether. Having the arrow show up here and there, and having characters that can stop time being key players to the story is carrying on this power scale by advancing the players on the chessboard towards an ultimate end. Nobody thinks that their time and jump will last forever, and neither did Araki. Part 6 is the last that would be published in Weekly Shonen Jump and brings the story of JoJo to an end. Part 6 offers us Araki's final step on the advancing power scale in an ending that's borderline nightmare fuel. Even though Dio is long dead, the reappearance of the arrow and the main enemy of Part 6 being his protege signifies to us that this grand generational tale has actually been carrying on this whole time. Part 5 even stars one of Dio's sons, the rest of whom all make appearances facing off against Jotaro and Jolene in Part 6. Pucci, Dio's protege, recalls Dio's endgame plan to restart the world itself, to bend it to his own will. Made in Heaven, a stand created by Pucci, is the culmination of Dio's plans against the Joestars and ultimate bid to obtain heaven. Complete and utter control over time itself. It counters Jotaro's stopping of time and results in his death. As Jolene urges Empareo to escape and somehow defeat Pucci, Pucci begins the ultimate technique for Made in Heaven, the ability to reset the universe. Time begins to quicken, to the point where corpses become skeletons, people in cold locations begin to freeze over instantly. The sun and moon leap across the sky in mere seconds. The water level of the sea observably lessens with each passing second. The truly horrifying presence of this stand is that the perception of time persists within people. What seems like a minute becomes a day, and what seems like an hour becomes a year. Time can't slow down, but instead only grows quicker and quicker. It's a surreal nightmare that brings up these horrifying feelings in all of us in the most bizarre of ways. In a sense, the only thing that stops us from death is the fact that we have seconds, minutes, and hours ahead of us. As the clock ticks upwards, our body clock ticks downwards. Seeing the only thing between us and death liquidize into nothingness and seeing everybody face their own demise is scary in a very primal way. Each page slowly becomes more horrifying than the last, until time speeds up to the point of infinity. At this point, the world resets. Araki says that whilst writing the 6th part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Stone Ocean, I started feeling a great sense of satisfaction regarding this stand's power. I felt like I had reached the peak of my creativity. As an author, I had drawn everything my capabilities allowed. Time that got faster and faster for human senses to perceive, getting closer to the concept of infinite, given we can't really comprehend much of it. How could there possibly be a stand power bigger than this? There's nothing more incredible. My creativity has reached the highest point. That's what I thought. I normally think that feelings like a sense of satisfaction or personal realization are extremely scary. In other words, I don't have anything more to draw. It's over. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure has reached its summit. This is Stone Ocean, the end. For the ending of a Weekly Shonen Jump series, Araki took the story to an extremely cold and dark place. It's a suitable, if not slightly heavy ending that brings everything back to how things were. Despite time becoming increasingly bizarre, it is simply the weapon of choice for the true vehicle of this bizarreness. To me, the thing that makes JoJo bizarre is this rivalry. Something that started as simple as a cart crashing on the side of the road ended up as this big epic story that we know and love. Araki had run out of steam at this point, and it can be seen with how things got ever so slightly more predictable in the later arcs that this was the case. Made in Heaven, whilst tragic for the characters in the story, recreates this bizarre catalyst into something new. Part 7, Steel Ball Run, is one of the most original and diverse JoJo parts in years, and this is because of Made in Heaven. By resetting the universe, we have a new catalyst. JoJo at this point has gone on for almost 32 years, and it's impressive that it is still enjoying a successful life to this day. Even though time runs out for everybody and everything, JoJo has thankfully reached a timelessness in that people will be enjoying this story for multiple generations to come, and that it has cemented its status as one of the classics. I want to thank my patrons for backing the creation of this video. Thank you Andy Gerxes, Brian Quinones, Golok, Gustavo Sanchez, Jamal Malik Clymer, Mishal Al-Najem, Paul, Roshan Terrell, and Tibor Magyar. And now I want to thank you for subscribing. I promise you won't regret it. All the best, take care, and I'll see you next time.